This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Blue Apron lowers expectations and its valuation just hours before its trading debut. We'll dig into the reasons behind the sudden reality check. Plus, the Petya attack continues to wreak havoc as its assault on networks across the globe enters a second day. We'll hear from the FireEye manager who did a deep dive on this latest virus. And insight from outer space on the new age of discovery. NASA record holder Peggy Whitson joins Bloomberg from the International Space Station to break down the new race to orbit new worlds. First to our lead. A cyber attack similar to WannaCry enters its second day, infecting computers in at least 65 countries, according to Microsoft. The attack is being carried out by a virus called Petya, crippling businesses, port operators, and government systems around the world as companies struggle to retake control of their networks. The ransomware locks infected computer systems and demands users to pay $300 in Bitcoin to regain access. Joining us from London, Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde. Caroline, you've been looking deeply into this. Talk about how much further we know this has spread.
Yeah, exactly, because about midday yesterday, Emily, we knew that some 2,000 computers had been infected, but now we know that that number is building because unlike the WannaCry virus, there is no automatic sort of off switch. There's no immediate kill button, which we managed to have with WannaCry, and so it spreads. 64 countries is what some of the reports that I'm reading now, from Belgium to Brazil, Russia to the United States. All of it, of course, stemmed in the Ukraine. That's where the Petya virus first really hit. And it seemed to have taken, well, government institutions, a central bank offline, even a nuclear company was affected. So clearly, real chaos at the root of this. If you're looking at some of the key companies in Europe, AP Moller-Maersk, it is the biggest container shipping unit in the world. Well, they had significant issues. They said that they had to shut down systems across the world. That's why we saw ports in India to New York affected. Interestingly, Maersk Line has now said that they're able to start taking new bookings, but you already have to have an account with them. But even companies like TNT Express, this is the Netherlands-based unit of FedEx, they're having so-called significant issues, they're saying. Shipments really being slowed there, delays in services. You're also seeing French bank BNP Paribas, WPP, the advertising company. You've got the maker of the Nivea moisturizing cream, Beiersdorf, also struggling to cope with the fallout. I think one thing that's really interesting, though, Emily, is maybe the ransomware part of this. Isn't that effective? Because, of course, the whole point is you're meant to be paying up to get access to your computer. But interestingly, Quartz have been looking at some data. They've actually got a chart to show, well, actually, Bitcoin, only about $10,000 has been taken in the first 24 hours. That's about 2/3 less than we saw with WannaCry.
So, Caroline, what more do we know about exactly where this attack originated?
As I mentioned, the epicenter, where it all kicked off, seemed to have been the Ukraine. How? Still being debated. What many people say is, like WannaCry virus that we saw last month, this was really playing upon a weakness in the Microsoft operating system. That seems to be how it is spread so virulently across the world. But where it seems to have been first started, interestingly, is in a Ukraine tax accounting software company called MeDoc. Now, I might add, this particular company has refuted that. They have said they have no responsibility for spreading this particular virus, but notable cybersecurity experts have said they think this is where initially it was first rooted, and then it spread through the Windows update, being disguised as a Windows update, but then it leached out from the Ukraine. I think what's interesting here is when you look at the payments being made. Why are few payments being made? Well, some security experts are saying actually this is rather rudimentary cyber hacking if you're looking for money. They're saying really this isn't a very efficient way of doing it if you wanted cash. Therefore, many feel this wasn't actually ever meant to raise money. It was meant to cause chaos. This is why perhaps the Ukraine is desperately trying to point the finger at Russia, and even why NATO is now involved.
All right, Caroline, hang on a sec. I do want to bring in John Miller, Senior Manager of Analysis at the cybersecurity firm FireEye. He also is the author of the company's latest research on the Peggy virus. John, what more can you tell us as far as what you've learned in the last 24 hours?
Certainly. The key thing about this malware is that it has been able to proliferate as quickly as it has using a very clever combination of known tactics and tools. Essentially, the attackers used a ransomware capability that was known and a couple spreading methods for the malware that were previously known, bundled them together in a creative way that, as we've seen over the last couple days, unfortunately, a lot of organizations were not prepared to handle.
So how similar and different is this to what happened with WannaCry?
This is similar in that the attackers are relying on the malware proliferating itself to new areas of compromised networks. And the way that it's different is, first of all, the malware uses a combination of methods for spreading itself rather than just one, which is what we saw with WannaCry. Additionally, the malware both encrypts victims' files as well as prevents them from booting their machines, which is a bit more serious than what WannaCry would typically do to a compromised system.
Caroline, what are you hearing from businesses, especially in Europe, about just how crippling this has been to their systems? How much has it actually held up business?
Significantly. And I think this is the issue, is that they just had to go into lockdown. That was the automatic reaction to this, as they'd seen just a month before how destructive this had been across the United Kingdom's health service, for example. I still go to the doctor now and they say that they can't access their computers correctly. So no wonder you therefore saw shutdowns in the websites of the likes of WPP, entire shutdowns of networks, as I mentioned, for the likes of AP Moller-Maersk and for FedEx's TNT Express. So this is wholesale business damage that is being done. This is more than 24 hours offline for certain companies, and this is why it's being quite so painful for many of them.
So, John, in this moment, what should businesses be doing, whether you're affected or you're not affected and you don't want to be?
So first of all, organizations can take a look at the characteristics of this specific malware payload that have been identified. Luckily, at this point, we've been able to do a great deal to understand what exactly the issue is here. In addition to that, though, organizations need to be watching closely for any evolution or new developments in this campaign. And finally, there are some baseline measures that organizations can take to defend themselves from any ransomware infection, such as having a robust backup strategy.
So ransomware, as we know, is on the rise. The hackers are always one step ahead. How do you see ransomware evolving? What's next?
The interesting thing about the rise of ransomware over the last few years is that the criminals behind it are excellent business analysts, in the sense that they do a really good job of evaluating where they need to invest in new capabilities and innovative capabilities, and where they can just take advantage of situations where businesses haven't been able to implement defenses against known threats. And really what we see with WannaCry, with Peggy as well as WannaCry to some extent is that happening. The criminals that we see operating these tools are taking advantage of known tools and known tactics and being very successful because the organizations that they're compromising haven't been able to fully defend themselves against these methods yet. So really organizations need to, oh, go ahead, thank you.
With WannaCry, it was interesting, just they really didn't manage to rack up that much money. Is this any different?
Yes. Yes, we've seen a similar situation here, as mentioned a couple minutes ago, where really the return on investment for the attackers has not been all that high, which could indicate that perhaps these attackers were out of their depth and didn't really know what to expect in terms of an infection base as broad as they have achieved.
All right, we'll leave it there. John Miller, Senior Manager of Analysis at FireEye, and our very own Caroline Hyde, doing great work for us on this in London. Thank you both. We'll continue to follow. A story we are following now. President Trump has always been vocal about fake news on Twitter. Now he's taking on Jeff Bezos again. Earlier, Trump tweeted, the hashtag Amazon Washington Post, sometimes referred to as the guardian of Amazon not paying internet taxes, with which they should, is fake news. Many were left unsure of what President Trump actually meant by this tweet and the reference to internet taxes, since federal internet taxes do not exist. According to the Amazon website, the company collects state sales taxes in all 45 states with a sales tax and the District of Columbia. A reminder that Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post in 2013 as an individual. Amazon is not involved. Coming up, more on Amazon. Its reign as the go-to place for online merchants is under siege. How the e-commerce giant plans to stay on top of the next sector. That is next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. The fallout continues for Binary Capital. Jonathan Teo, the last remaining co-founder, has offered his resignation to the firm's investors. In a letter obtained by Bloomberg, Teo told the firm's LPs, "If the investor groups believe that my removal serves the best interest of investors, I will respectfully resign. I know that the avalanche of media coverage and continued questions regarding my behavior that has occurred these past few days has been a distraction." The venture capital firm has also announced the venture capital firm is also shutting down its most recent fund. Investors have agreed to this. This after its co-founder, Justin Kalbeck, resigned amidst allegations of sexual misconduct, as reported by The Information. Binary had raised about $175 million for that fund, but very little of the money had been invested and will be returned to the firm's limited partners. Questions still remain about how the firm will handle investments it's already made from its first fund. Amazon is facing major competition from millions of mom-and-pop shops across the U.S., with Walmart, among others, successfully courting many of the same merchants. In response, Amazon is holding its own meet and greet with 1,500 merchants in New York. It is the first such event since the company opened for business more than 21 years ago. Joining us now, Bloomberg tech reporter Spencer Soper, who attended the event and covers Amazon for us. So, Spencer, after more than 2 decades, why now?
Yeah, Amazon's realizing that it has to give its sellers more of a personal touch. The entire system selling on its marketplace, there's 2 million merchants that put products on Amazon and sell them through that system. So you're actually buying from them, not from Amazon. Amazon's just the go-between. But that system is very automated. You go online, you register as a seller, you post photos, that sort of thing. There's not much of a human connection. And so Amazon's trying to give sellers what they want, which is more of a personal touch, and an ability to learn more about ways to sell on Amazon.
So why do third-party merchants matter so much to Amazon?
Well, it helps them keep prices low because you have merchants competing with one another to sell the same things, and it also helps keep the inventory fresh and broad. They want to sell as many things as possible. So about half of all products sold on Amazon are through the marketplace. So our purchases made from these smaller businesses selling on Amazon and not from Amazon directly. So it's a very big deal to them. And what they're trying to do now is promote Amazon as an avenue, not just to reach shoppers in the U.S., but also to use Amazon services to reach customers globally. So that was a big push at the meeting today, is encouraging sellers who have had some success selling things on Amazon, reaching customers in the U.S., to encourage them to use Amazon services to sell to shoppers in Europe, in China, and Brazil. And they offer a lot of services like currency exchange rates to simplify the process for smaller businesses who might think it's too complicated.
Now, I got to ask you about this Amazon Washington Post tweet from President Trump. Again, the Amazon Washington Post, sometimes referred to as the guardian of Amazon, now paying internet taxes, which they should, is fake news. Amazon does pay state taxes, as we've discussed. What is the president talking about here?
Wish I knew. There is this funny relationship between Trump and Bezos where it goes back to during his election campaign, where this kind of became a good deflection from any critical story in the Washington Post about President Trump. Trump could tweet something and say, "Oh, it's just Jeff Bezos is worried about me coming after him because Amazon's getting so big." And so with it's hard to understand exactly what he means when he says internet taxes. It's most likely sales taxes on online purchases. That used to be a very big deal for Amazon. Initially, it goes back to a 1992 Supreme Court ruling that said it's too onerous to expect a business to know all of the tax laws in every little town and state around the country. And so if you make a purchase across state lines, that merchant selling to you either online or through a magazine catalog does not have to do the sales tax. It's generally up to the shopper to do that as part of their taxes at the end of the year. No one ever does it. It's not enforced. So basically the tax money just gets lost. It's become a much bigger deal as online shopping has grown. And now, but it's not such a big deal for Amazon because there was a requirement about whether you have a building in that state, some sort of physical presence in that state. Initially, Amazon had warehouses in small states near big ones to get the advantage of that tax loophole. But as they've tried to get closer and closer to customers, they have warehouses in those states, and they've been collecting sales taxes on things purchased directly from Amazon.
It's interesting timing given that the president just met with Jeff Bezos last week and the Amazon Whole Foods deal is pending. We'll continue to watch the president's Twitter feed as we do. Bloomberg tech reporter Spencer Soper in New York for us. Thank you so much, Spencer. Quick programming note, tune into Bloomberg on July 4th at 8 p.m. Eastern, where Alex Steele, Carol Masser, and Matt Miller will co-host the Boston Pops Fireworks Spectacular live from Boston's historic Esplanade. This is Bloomberg. As we've been reporting, the petrovirus is spreading throughout the globe, infecting businesses, port operators, and government computer systems. The CEO of one of the world's largest robotics makers, Switzerland's ABB, says cybersecurity is now central to the company's business. ABB CEO Ulrich Spiesshofer spoke exclusively with Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie in Hangzhou, China, at the unveiling of the company's new digital strategy for the region.
Now, if you look at the drivers for robotics, there are basically three key buckets in China. The one is the labor situation. The second element is quality and productivity. And the third part is safety and health. All this together makes China today the largest robotics market on this planet. And it will be the largest robotics market for the next 10 years. ABB has invested early.
How would you characterize the level of competition in China now amongst the robot makers?
And are firmly committed to keep our #1 position for the years to come. We are the only robotics player in the world that has a combination of AI, artificial intelligence application, not only in robotics, but in other process control opportunities that there are. The use of AI today is spreading very quickly in ABB. We have our two-armed robot Yumi. It's now so smart it can take the Rubik's Cube, look at it, and solve it in less than 2 minutes. That would have been unthinkable just years ago. Today we are at that level.
There is increased skepticism now that the administration will be able to push through its infrastructure spending plans, and we've seen that reflected in the IMF reducing its forecast for the US. How much of a missed opportunity is this, do you think?
If you look at the US infrastructure situation long term, the US will need to invest in the energy infrastructure, in the electricity infrastructure, in the road system, to really have a competitive platform going forward. At the moment, it looks like there are a couple of ripples in the system. It's not going as smoothly as originally anticipated at the beginning of the year. My wish is that it will be sorted out very quickly and that there is stability in the system that gives investment appetite a good platform to really be lifted then going forward.
To what degree do you see a reduction in political risk in Europe, given the election of President Macron in France? Or does the question of Brexit just overshadow all of the perceived reduction in political risk and the more positive economic fundamentals that we're seeing in Europe?
I think the risk scenario has improved from the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, we didn't know how France would come out. We had a German situation that was a little bit wobbly at that time, and you had Brexit. France is now sorted out. We know how the French government will be set up, and there's a clear agenda going forward. It looks like that in Germany the predictions are also that it will be a quite stable and predictable environment. The Brexit situation is very unfortunate from our perspective, but it is because it creates a lot of uncertainty and insecurity, and that's something that we have to overcome as politicians, as entrepreneurs going forward. But all together, I would expect towards the end of this year, Europe to be quite stable and be quite predictable going into the next year.
How much of a drag has the weak oil price been on the oil and gas section, the oil and gas part of the ABB business?
We had a massive downward contraction in many of our end customers. If you look at the marine segment, we are very strong in the marine segment of oil and gas supply vessel. This market contracted more than 70% year on year. So this is something that we have dealt with, and I'm pretty proud because if you look at, this was a highly profitable segment in the past. It has contracted massively. We have kept the top line steady, and we have held the margin up well, even increased it. So altogether, the team has done a good job in this environment.
That was ABB CEO Ulrich Spiesshofer. Coming up, Apple will celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the iPhone on Thursday, but will it continue to be the company's moneymaker? We'll get the latest predictions from Loup Ventures co-founder Gene Munster next. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. President Trump is going to Paris. French President Emmanuel Macron's office says Mr. Trump has accepted an invitation to attend Bastille Day celebrations on July 14th. American troops will march in a parade to mark the 100th anniversary of the U.S. entry into World War I. Two House Democrats want details on how much has been spent on trips the president made to his Florida estate and other properties. They plan to introduce an amendment to the annual defense policy bill that would require the Air Force to submit travel expense reports to Congress. Academic and military experts today told the Senate Intelligence Committee there's no question that Russia interfered in last year's U.S. presidential election. The witnesses unanimously agreed Vladimir Putin is the one who ordered the move. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro says Tuesday's attack on the country's Supreme Court and Interior Ministry was an attempted coup. It followed months of deadly anti-government protests. Maduro condemned the violence but said, quote, "We will never surrender." Pope Francis gave the Catholic Church 5 new cardinals today, instructing them to act as servants and not princes. Cardinals are often referred to as princes of the Church, a reflection of their prestigious roles of advising the Pope and electing his successor. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Wednesday here in Washington, already 7:30 Thursday morning in Sydney. We're joined by Bloomberg's James Thornhill, who has a look at the markets. James, good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, we're looking at a firmer open here, especially in New Zealand, which is about to open shortly. Following that strong lead on Wall Street, Australian stock market futures also pointing higher in early trade here. It's interesting to note that New Zealand has been absolutely crushing it against Australia in terms of stock market performance since April. That's mainly due to the fact that Australia's been lagging since the iron ore prices have been on the way down, and also the government slapped a bank levy on the top banks, which has seen them track lower as well. So New Zealand's market doing a lot better relative to its Australian peer. Coming up later today, we have Japanese retail sales. We're expecting a 1% decline there, so no good news on the high street in Japan. And we also have a business survey out in Korea later on. Also in Australia, Rio Tinto is their shareholders will convene in Sydney later today. They're going to vote on the company's deal to sell its Hunter Valley coal assets to Yancoal. I'm James Thornhill in Sydney. This is Bloomberg Technology.
This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Thursday marks 10 years since the iPhone was released to the public. Sales of the device continue to make up a large portion of Apple's revenue, about 60% since 2011. But Gene Munster predicts that iPhone sales will peak in 2019 and be replaced by an entirely new product. Joining us now from New York, Loup Ventures co-founder and longtime Apple analyst Gene Munster, and here with me in San Francisco, Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman, who covers consumer technology. So Gene, I'm going to start with you. You think that Apple AR glasses are the Apple product of the future. What, when, where, how, why?
Well, Emily, we're just filling in the blanks here. What we do know is they've launched ARKit. We know that the next iPhone is going to have a 3D mapping chip that's going to be especially geared for a premium AR experience. And we know Apple's done acquisitions, obviously with Mataio a few years ago, and then more recently with this Senso company. And so when you think about those three together and also think about the most logical use case for AR is some form of a wearable, despite Google's problems with Glass, it seems logical. Our 3-year is just a best guess. And so what we feel confident is that Apple is going to have this new product category, but the timing of it is a guess.
Now, Mark, you've done some reporting on this. As Gene said, Google Glass, not a success. Snapchat Spectacles, not a success. How would this be different?
Well, first of all, I think Gene's totally right. The wearables, in terms of using AR on Glass as a Google Glass-like device made by Apple, is Apple's next big product category, of course, after the HomePod comes out. How will they differentiate? Well, Apple comes from a unique position where they're bringing the hardware expertise from making small devices like the Apple Watch and the iPhone, but they also have the software there, right? Google didn't have an operating system that it could apply to such a device. Android was still in its infancy when Google Glass came out. Apple now has this robust iOS platform that it could port to any type of devices we've seen them do in the past.
But what are the use cases, Gene? Is this something that gamers would wear or something that you think is more mainstream?
Well, I would point viewers to a story today from Johnny Evans from Computer World, where he maps out 12 use cases for augmented reality. And that's much more than just gaming. It could be anything from a remote assistant to architectural, being able to see buildings before they're designed. You could do art, medical emergency services. One that I particularly love is turning humans into robots. There's this company called Stream AR that basically allows service providers the ability to do estimates remotely, so they don't have to get in their cars and drive around. I think to Mark's point is what's important here is that they have an army of developers, and we're just scratching the surface a few weeks into this, and I think that that base of developers will come up with ideas beyond what we're talking about today.
Is this something people actually want to wear, though, Mark?
That's a good question. I don't know if I would wear them, but you know what's actually really interesting? I remember Tim Cook a few years ago, before the Apple Watch came out, he was asked about wearables, and he was sort of hinting that their first wearable is going to be a watch. And the way he hinted at it is he said he wears glasses because he has to, because he can't see without them. So when these things hit the streets, there's going to be a lot of people pulling up that comment from Cook and saying that, you know, he would never wear them, and now you see him wearing them on stage. So it's going to be sort of ironic. But yes, I think there's going to be a market for it. It's going to eventually replace the iPhone. I know Gene has said this in the past. You'll be able to make phone calls from it, get maps on there, applications. And to answer your earlier question about gaming, I think gaming is going to be one component of it. But gaming is really tuned to VR experiences being fully enclosed, something that Apple was talking about with the Mac at its developers conference earlier in the month. So I don't think gaming is going to be the big focus. I think it's going to be more driving information to your eyes, quickly glancing at things, getting directions.
All right, you guys are very bullish on this. Gene, what about the iPhone? How do you expect iPhone sales to play out? I know you think that they'll peak in 2019.
So this next year, the next iPhone cycle is going to be wonderful for the iPhone. Probably units up 12 to 15% after essentially being flat for the past year. But I think that's probably the last big cycle. And I think when we start fast forwarding to a couple years from now, they're going to have difficult comps. So that naturally gets us to, this will now be, we're talking about fiscal 19, basically calendar 18, is something that's more or less flat year over year. And then you start getting into 20 and 21 where some of these wearables come out. Now, I think that the number of units they're going to sell in 2020, these are just guesses, but is very small, 3 million. So it's not going to quite erode at the iPhone, but as Mark's talking about, I think that as the utility of these wearables becomes more clear to consumers, that will start to chip away at the iPhone experience. They're both going to be around in 10 years, but the iPhone's going to be a much smaller business.
What do we know in terms of how we expect the iPhone to be spiced up this next time around?
Oh, well, it's going to be a big update. One of the bigger updates. For the first time, they're going to be doing 3 new phones. So they have the 7 and 7 Plus right now. They'll update both of those with faster processors, maybe better cameras. But then there's going to be an all-new model that people are very excited about. Some call it the iPhone 8, others the iPhone X. A stainless steel frame, glass on the front and back, sort of like the iPhone 4, curved glass edges on both sides, and of course the heart of it will be this OLED screen, deeper blacks, deeper whites. The screen will look a bit clearer, crisper. The screen will be bigger, but it's interesting because it's all going to fit in an iPhone 7 size form factor.
Now, Gene, I'm curious for your thoughts about Apple and cars. We got some comments from Tim Cook where he, for the first time, really acknowledged Apple's ambitions here. Now we know that Apple has a deal with Hertz to lease 6 Lexus SUVs to test self-driving technology. What do you expect to see from Apple when it comes to cars?
A lot of my expectations are based on great work that Mark's done around this, so following a lot of his lead. But our belief is there's 3 essential routes that they can go. One is do a car entirely themselves. The second is to do some sort of a software. And the third is probably some sort of a fleet opportunity. I've had a bad prediction around Apple and the TV, so I'm reluctant to say and put the hammer down that Apple's going to have a car. But I would say that it's very clear that this is a big market, 90 million cars sold, and that Apple wants to have a place in this. I don't think that they have their plan in place as far as how they're going to address that market. So our expectations over the next 5 years do not include any revenue from Apple Car.
And how about AirPods? Are these a sort of closet hit?
They definitely are. I think this is going to be the sneaky product over the next 5 years. I think that it's going to become much more of an augmented hearing product. We call it a hearable. And I think you'll be doing things like being able to be in a loud bar and be able to zero in on someone's, hopefully a friend's conversation, be able to tune out some of that noise around you. There's other biofeedback that they can get. They have a lot of patents around the ear canal. We think that the AirPods will be bigger than Apple Watch in the next 5 years.
I still, though, Mark, I do a double take when I see someone wearing them. They're not necessarily stylish yet.
Right. I mean, I wear them. I don't love wearing them. I think sometimes I'll even go out in public. If I wanted to wear the AirPods, I'll say, actually, you know what? I'm just going to put in the wired lightning headphones if I'm going for a jog or something. But the utility, as Gene was saying, is very strong. There's a lot they can do on the software side to improve the uses. I saw a lot of people talking about this augmented hearing concept. I think we're still early there. I think if they were going to do something big in the audio space, they would have talked about it with the HomePod. It's going to happen in the near future, but the future's long, so we'll see.
All right. Mark Gurman, our consumer tech reporter, thanks so much. Gene Munster, always great to have you on the show, co-founder.
Thank you.
Now, to Tencent's rising dominance over the Chinese messaging market. More than 2/3 of the population use Tencent's 2 messaging apps, WeChat and QQ, for everything from texting to shopping to watching videos and ordering food. And according to venture capitalist Mary Meeker, Chinese users collectively spend 1.7 billion hours a day on Tencent's apps, more than they spend on all other app platforms combined. As part of this week's Bloomberg Businessweek Global Tech issue, our senior executive editor, Brad Stone, traveled to China to find out more about Tencent. And Tencent, there really isn't a good comp here in the United States.
No, because it's not just a messaging service. It really is a portal, that's an old word. In the smartphone context, though, it's true, to the entire internet, right? You use WeChat on your phone, and you use it to hail DD vehicles, to pay with things. WeChat Pay is used by 600 million people. Online dating. I mean, it's so much of a threat that people have begun to think of it really as an internet platform and a challenge to mobile operating systems like iOS. It's that powerful.
You got rare access to a Tencent executive, Martin Lau. Tell us more about him.
Right. So, well, the first name that people need to know is Pony Ma, right? Because he is the co-founder and the CEO of Tencent. But he's very reclusive, right? He's sort of your typical Shenzhen businessman. Doesn't like to talk too much about his company. Very low profile. Martin Lau is the COO, the president of the company. He is often considered the sort of Sheryl Sandberg of Tencent. He's sort of the ambassador to the global business community. A quick Martin Lau story. When the company was negotiating to buy Supercell last year, he flew 10 hours to Helsinki, totally ill, had a fever, and played the game Clash Royale so frequently on the trip that he scored the 97th highest score in the world for that week. And then, in fact, he played a Supercell engineer and won. So lots of different talents, but he is really one of the managers of Tencent.
So also quite a skilled gamer. Good to know. Does Tencent have a chance to expand WeChat internationally?
I mean, the easy answer is sort of no, right? Because Facebook and WhatsApp are in all other markets. And it's also such an indigenously Chinese app, right? You're familiar with how different the sort of design sensibilities are. Lots of stuff crammed into WeChat. Whereas in the West, we tend to have one separate app for everything that we do. But I mean, I think the big obstacle is the fact that, and Martin Lau, sort of admits this, that they have to take another path, and that path more recently has been investment and acquisitions.
You reported that Tencent tried to buy WhatsApp, which of course Facebook ended up buying in 2014. What happened? Right.
So a couple years ago, they saw that opportunity. Actually, Martin was going to travel with Pony Ma, who had back surgery and couldn't travel, and then Mark Zuckerberg swooped in and paid considerably more than they were considering. But look, I mean, Tencent has invested in Snapchat, they've invested in Tesla, they've invested in the German mapping company here. The list goes on. In fact, in China, it's considered to be an offer you can't refuse to get access to the WeChat ecosystem and take an investment from Tencent. So, there's a kind of soft power at work here where Tencent, despite the product being only popular in China, is really one of the biggest, perhaps along with SoftBank, and Alibaba, one of the biggest investors on the global internet stage.
So how else might we see Tencent expand its footprint internationally? Will we feel it in the U.S.?
I think as an investor, right? And this is where Martin Lau is particularly challenged because the messaging game is almost over. It's played out around the world, and technology is moving in the direction where Tencent kind of has to struggle to follow it into deep technology spheres like AI and driverless cars. They're making a lot of investments. That's what the Tesla investment is about. But this is a company that is putting its capital to work to learn about these new areas, but is going to have to consider carefully how it expands from a product perspective.
So if Facebook has made major, bold, unexpected moves, what's Tencent's next big?
Well, I mean, look, Facebook's got a challenge in China, right? I mean, these two companies are kind of dancing around each other. What is Tencent's boldest move? I think it probably would be an acquisition of the kind that they lost out to with WhatsApp. He also, Martin Lau told us, he wanted to make a more strategic investment in Snapchat a couple years ago. Evan Spiegel was uncomfortable with that. So I think they have to find an asset overseas that maybe, that's not just a video gaming company where they can make a little bit more of an impact.
All right, our Bloomberg senior executive editor, Brad Stone, with that new story out in Business Week this week. You can check out Brad's article on stands this week. Turning now to stocks, it was quite the bounce back day for the NASDAQ, the tech-heavy index posting its best day since the U.S. election. It is now on pace for its 8th straight month of gains. If that holds, then the NASDAQ will post its longest monthly winning streak since September of 1995. And in today's edition of Tech's Revolving Door, a former Uber executive is heading to the DNC. Now that's according to Recode. Rafi Krikorian, who worked as a top engineer at Uber's self-driving program, will be the Democratic National Committee's next chief technology officer. The organization wants to improve its tech in an attempt to attract more voters and strengthen its cybersecurity. Last year, Russian-backed hackers attacked the group and leaked emails from then-President Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Coming up, an interview from space, literally, with NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson, the first female commander of the International Space Station. That is next. And a quick programming note, this Thursday, U.S. Secretary of Interior Ryan Zinke will appear on Bloomberg Daybreak Americas as the White House rolls out programs and initiatives for its Energy Week. Catch that conversation 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. How do you walk that line
when you're in the middle of a crisis situation?
It's really all about enabling people. Technology needs to serve everyone.
But at the end of the day, it's all about emotional decision.
I think there's huge innovation left in music.
The hallmark of a truly great leader is that great is never great enough.
For us, it's not about being first, it's about being the best.
A U.S. court has been told that Oracle discussed buying data analytics company Palantir Technologies last year. Palantir investor Mark Abramowitz told the hearing that Peter Thiel even met with Oracle founder Larry Ellison to discuss a possible acquisition. Abramowitz is suing the company to gain access to internal records. He accuses Palantir of blocking his efforts to sell part of his stake in the company. Now, back in the day, NASA was the only game in town when it came to the U.S. space exploration. But now there's Elon Musk's SpaceX, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. So are they competitors or partners in the race to test beyond the bounds of the Earth? NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson, the holder of the record for the longest time spent in space, joined Bloomberg Daybreak Americas from the International Space Station itself and talked about how public and private space programs have evolved.
At the place we are right now, the government can do more, but that is, for instance, we're seeding some of the money, seed money for some of the commercial providers. SpaceX and Orbital ATK are providing cargo up here to the space station. Hopefully in the next year or so, we'll be actually getting crews supplied by SpaceX or Boeing. And so I think the commercial to private, the government to commercialization is transitioning right now, and it's fantastic to see the cargo coming up on all these different vehicles. And I really do think it's the future because just like aviation, it has to expand in order to be really prolific. And having these programs in place now is definitely a stepping stone for further development. And that allows the government then to spend more money on going and exploring beyond low Earth orbit, which is what the current limitations are planned for some of the commercial providers. And we do hope to encourage them to continue on actually into further deep space as well.
So finally, Peggy, let's go way beyond lower Earth orbit. There's a lot of talk right now about colonizing Mars, actually going to Mars and living there. You've been living in space a fair amount of your life now over the last 15 years. Is that a realistic goal to set, to actually have a colony on Mars?
I do think it's a fantastic goal to have. We should have colonies on Mars and the Moon, and we should be expanding and exploring even further. So yes, and I think it's going to take some technology development, and we're using the International Space Station here to perfect some of those technologies. For instance, if we go on a multi-year mission to Mars, we need to be able to have a closed life support system, which means we need to be able to process our urine and make it into drinking water. We do that here on board the space station, and you know, we're at about 85% of what we call closing the loop of life support systems, at least in the water balance system. And so it's very exciting to be a part of those investigations, those testing, engineering and testing that's going on up here right now.
NASA astronaut Peggy Whitson there speaking from the International Space Station. And finally, Alibaba is tightening control of online shopping mall Lazada Group. The largest e-commerce company in China is investing another $1 billion to raise its stake in Lazada to 83%. Lazada is headquartered in Singapore, and Alibaba can use this investment to further its expansion into Southeast Asia. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. On Thursday's show, Tony Fadell, the former Apple executive known as the father of the iPod, will join the show on the 10th anniversary of the iPhone's release. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.